If you don't know, I'm a Chinese background. Okay? Some people think I'm Korean. I'm not. Okay? I'm Chinese. I'm born in Toronto all my life, so very rooted in this city. People ask me all the time, where do you want to live? I'm like, I just like being in Toronto. I just love it so much. And I've been a pastor for close to 20 years now, right? Yeah, just there's a joy of being in ministry that I've really loved, and now I'm married to my wife Joy for 13 years.
About your rescue story, how did Jesus come into your life?
Do you have a lot of time?
Well, we have some more stories coming.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a Christian. I think I shared that in service, maybe right before the Thailand trip. And I grew up non-Christian. All throughout my life, I grew up in a good home. Really grateful for that. Good values. It wasn't a Christian home. It was actually probably more of a Buddhist home. My mom was Buddhist when I was growing up, and followed her to temple here and there and all that. But it was a home of good values. Really, really enjoyed a lot of my childhood. But probably where I had a really big struggle in my life, where things started to spiral in a different way, was probably closer to the end of high school. I was around 17 at the time, and a lot of my friendships in that season of my life started to just fall apart. I don't know if you've gone through that, but my friendships started to fall apart, relationships were falling apart, and even in my home, my parents were going through a separation at that time, and so there was a lot of confusion even in the home. At that time, if anyone here is a sports fan, like I was a basketball fanatic. Like, I had dreams of going to the NBA until I realized I was a short Asian man. Okay?
There's always Jeremy Lin.
He wasn't there back then. He didn't pave the way yet. But basketball was my life then, but that year I broke my hand. I couldn't play basketball anymore. And I wanted to go to art school. Couldn't do that either because I broke my hand. So a lot of things just began spiraling. And it just made life was just difficult, and I couldn't live up to many people's expectations of me. I don't know if you've ever felt that. Parents' expectations of me, my own expectations of myself that I had, and just like the pressure that I felt living in other people's shadows as well. It just spiraled me in a very unhealthy place. It was a very lonely place, but it was in that place where I also asked a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions in my life, I questioned my identity. Like, what is all this for? What am I chasing after? Who am I doing all this for? Those were the questions. That's some of the stuff I was like thinking about in my mind. And I was like, give me a Bible. Give me a Bible. Let me start reading. What's the next Bible study class that I could take? And I just started learning about who this God was, who Jesus was in their lives, the love that they exuded. I wanted that, right? And I remember praying in that moment, and just the overwhelming sense of God's presence that I've never felt before just overcame me. And I began weeping in that room by myself. Nobody was in the house, it's just me in my room. I began weeping uncontrollably, not because of the breakup anymore, but I was actually weeping because of just being in God's presence. And that was the first time I would say in my life where it wasn't just about the knowledge of God anymore. Like, I knew God in my head for those many months that I was learning, but I met him, right, in that place. And it became so real to me. And I wrote this down, and I journaled this that very, very day, where it was almost like this overwhelming embrace. And it was, people always ask me, like, what did you hear from the Lord? Right? I was like, the only way I can explain it is like, it's like an audible thought, right? I assumed that nobody else would hear it but me. And I wrote this down, and he said, Derek, I know you're hurting, but I've always been with you. And everything you've gone through this entire year, I've been using for good. And I have a plan, and I have a purpose for you. And that's all I needed to hear. And I lost it. I completely lost it. I was wrecked. I was weeping. And it was that day where I prayed that prayer on my own. I was like, Jesus, I need you. I need you. I got baptized a few months later. And I would say that, overall, God has been really, really good. And since then, where God has worked the most probably in my life is actually through my family. I was the first Christian in my family. 3 years later, I got to minister to my sister. She became Christian. She's a pastor now. And then in 2014, I got to baptize my own mom. And my sister got to baptize my grandparents. So it's been amazing.
I love Hosea the prophet says God takes us into the wilderness to woo us. And he strips everything away so it's just him. It seems like God did that as a teenager. I mean,
I was at this youth retreat and I was praying for these two kids who were drug addicts at the time. And I was just so grateful that they were there at this youth retreat. And I was laying my hands on them, praying for these kids during just one of the evening sessions. And again, this was probably the second time. It hasn't happened many, many times, but again, that audible thought, which probably only I can hear. And the Lord just said, Derek, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. This is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You know,
most amazing thing is,
oh, not at the time. Not at the time. I'm like, I have plans, right? And I wrestled with that. I wrestled with it. Is this a calling? Is it not? But a lot of my pastors, my mentors at the time at the church I was at, they helped me. They helped form me. They helped really affirm me, saying, Derek, I think you've been called to ministry. And so from then on, I changed directions. Went to left the animation thing. Went to school for computer science. I don't know why. Don't ask me that question. I don't know why. And then got my MDiv, and then went right into ministry.
So I kind of feel conflicted about this because I'm actually now kind of glad you broke your hand. Because it led you to us. So that's a good thing. So broken hand, if you got a broken bone, look what God can do.